Hello, bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 52 of Little Things for Bonsai People. And this time I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Carmen Leskoviansky. How's it going, Carmen?
Pretty good. How are you?
And a very special feature with our editor today, Matt O'Donnell. How's it going, man?
It's going all right. Here I am.
Yep, there he is. Every once in a while, we're going to get Matt on. I know he's got a fairly busy schedule, but we figured today we'd put him in there because the last week's episode, we had some really philosophical kind of talk and stuff, and it seemed to hit. And so Matt was like, hey, I went on in that. You can take that whole section out.
Nope,
Matt,
leaving it in. We're leaving it in.
You got to put a big old bleep out right there because that's not appropriate for the first 15 seconds of the cast. But no, Matt decided he wanted in on that conversation. So
I'm really sad Mike isn't here because I wanted to give him like a Zoom hug and embrace him and make him feel better while he cries himself to sleep about art.
Yeah, after the last episode. Before we get to this, the topic of today's episode, I want to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons over at patreon.com/Little Things for Bonsai People. Head on over there and become a Bonsai Best Bud and hang out in the Discord and talk with these amazing people. Become a $5 patron to hang out with Tori Solis, Vicky Oft, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers. Did I say that one already? Snappy Chappers. Every once in a while I second guess myself on that one. Chappers. Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, Greenwich Gardens, Taylor Peacock, Chase Pertwee, Austin Atkins, Karen Codswell, Urin in Bonsai Garden, Luis Torres, AC Castle, Bonsai Marine, Jazz Pods. I'm going to say jazz today, like jazz. Chris Fasoon, and Timothy Arsenault. Timothy. Yep. Our patrons get a shout out at the beginning of every episode. And also, Timothy Arsenault is the founder of the Bonsai Bar. Let's get that ad read in there, Carmen.
This podcast is supported by Bonsai Bar, the beginner bonsai workshop popping up in breweries all across the Northeast. Bonsai Bar is 2 hours of tiny tree goodness disguised as a night out with friends. Come grab drinks, create a new tree, and watch as your friends and family get the bug for bonsai. Bonsai Bar is always looking for teachers and assistants, and you listen to this podcast, so you're probably already qualified. Bring your knowledge out to the bar. Apply today. Find event tickets, contact info, and more at bonsaibar.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bonsai Bar, for supporting our show and being our sponsor. And I can't go much further without mentioning you, Matt. You make us sound smart. You clean up the audio.
It's a me.
Make us sound enjoyable to listen to. You can go over to mattodonnell.com to fill out a contact form and start your own podcast show or an audio engineering project with him. He's a set bassist living out of Nashville, Tennessee, and he's an all-around awesome guy. It's in the script. I say it every time. So...
Is that part in the script you say every time too?
So, yes, so is in there. So it's got it's like so period. Now start talking about the topic. But no, so we were talking about the way of seeing things not apparently, but more close in line with art versus representation or reference points. And I believe that you, Matt, wanted to add a few things to it.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of wanted to, like, there were things that I heard in there that sound awfully close to the way, music operates and stuff like that, and like the kind of stuff that I work on as well. And, it was actually, it's funny, it started sort of before the last podcast happened. Mike had posted something on Instagram talking about a tree and like focusing on it or something. Let me see if I can find it real fast without taking up a bunch of time. Not like I'm not going to be the person cutting out the extra time anyway.
Yeah. Creating work for yourself.
Yeah. I said something to the effect of like, the thing that we think about in music a lot is like, especially in recording and making records, the first mission all the time is to serve the song. Rather than like trying to put your thing on it, which I know is counterintuitive to what Mike was talking about on the last episode, but there's sort of like a synergy there. I'm a like big sucker for balance, and so thinking about like serving the, not product isn't the right word, but like serving like the purpose but also, instilling like your own confidence in it rather than necessarily ego or things like that is like a big thing. But the other thing that really struck me was when he was talking about, talking with Laurent and saying how he was talking about how like technique has to be impeccable before you like go off script too hard. And it made me think of the composer Arnold Schoenberg, who was the like forefather of atonal and like weird music outside the structure of like tonal music. But if you studied with Schoenberg, people went to him to learn how to be, avant-garde and stuff like that, but he wouldn't let you learn anything about that until he had taught you like total mastery over traditional music. And so that was really the sort of thing that like spurred that. And then, Mike talking about whether or not he thought that he was truly creative versus just applying technique.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really abstract thought in itself, really, is like, what is being creative? And that was like where we had come to it for a moment there, was like, what is art? What does it really mean? Or how do we even create it? So yeah.
Well, since I don't know, like, why don't the two of you take this opportunity to tell me what you guys think of as the short version of like, if someone were to ask you at a cocktail party what the idea of art in bonsai is, like, what would you say?
Well, since I go to so many cocktail parties.
Well, but
yeah.
Carmen, you want to take it first, and then I'll kind of take what you said and make it steal some of your ideas.
Yeah, you can steal ideas. That's fine. I think a lot of it is kind of what I've kind of hinted to before with Mike at the last episode of art in bonsai. There's maybe two ways to look at it. One being kind of like what Cosmic Bonsai does, which is straying from all of the traditions or choosing some traditions to break and doing something a little bit different, but in a way that's appropriate, right? So you're still creating balance. You're still using traditional techniques essentially to create something that, maybe doesn't look like a traditional bonsai, but could fall in that realm. You're displaying it in a way that is reminiscent of traditional bonsai. So I think there's that kind of art, which is like kind of breakaway, finding this new thing. And then I think there's also art in perfecting the tradition. So the super, super perfect, what you would expect a bonsai to look like, right? Like the look of the black pine or the juniper that's done so meticulously well and displayed in such a way that really like embodies what you imagine bonsai being. I think there's an art in achieving kind of that level of perfection as well. So I think there's kind of two ways to look at art in bonsai. So tradition and the kind of breakaway stuff. Does that make sense? But I'm trying to think more too, because I think there's probably more to it.
Oh, there's always more to it.
But off the top of my head, that's my quick answer.
Yeah, I was going to say I would ask you if there's less to it. Or an easier question is, especially as someone who like doesn't know anything about this at all, like, would you say that traditional bonsai is inherently art at all?
Yeah.
I think so, because it's so hard because people always have this art versus craft debate, and like, at what point does a table or a chair become an art versus the craft of woodworking? I think that there's a really big gray area here where, some people might just see it as applying technique where other people see it as art. I think there's art in wait, can you repeat the question?
I asked if you thought that there was art inherently in traditional technical bonsai.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's balance, there's harmony, there's all these different pieces that have to come together to make a composition, even though you're trying to show what a tree, it's an abstraction of a tree in nature. So there's some human element of creation there. I think it's inherently art.
Yeah, what about like the word expression? I think that is like, I think that in some way is the thing that like applying art versus craft, like, is it expressing something? You know, I was going to say intention because intention is big in so many things, but like, you know, expression was more the word that I'm a super nerd for words. So
no, I think that's really, I love the semantics of it because I think, I don't know that the Japanese, I would love to talk to one of them about this, and if when they go into creating bonsai, if they're looking to do any kind of personal expression or if they're trying to create a statement, because I think we do a lot of that here in the States. So it's hard to say.
I have something to kind of add on to that. It's like about how there could be, in Japan, there could be hundreds of that same looking Japanese black pine or Satsuki azalea, and you see rows and rows of them. This was kind of referring back to the, there's that one with that weird branch. But there's also this other aspect that I'm starting to see pop up in American bonsai a good bit, is there's not a lot of people producing in America. This is going to be North American bonsai, not really other places. I see this every once in a while, like kind of in European bonsai. You'll see like a lot of the same trees, but for some reason we're a little bit more into making individuals than they are in Japan. Like in North America, I've seen so many different takes. And then one of the things that happens a lot here, and I'm guilty of this too, is like we'll make our rendition of that, and then we'll just suddenly go off and make something where like this is unique, and then we'll give it a name, which just, you know, like, is that appropriate? Because then that's how a lot of people label art. Is like, if it's a piece of art, then it has to have a name. Sometimes some high pieces of art don't have names. It's like number 1, number 2, number 3. And I know, like, for instance, like Walter Paul, he does that a little bit where he's like, here's Carpinus number 1, number 2, number 3, and he's got a lot of them, and they look similar in a way, but by naming them, it's kind of given them a little bit more of an identification in, you know, time frame. How many up to this point did it take him to do this particular style with this tree, and now this is the 29th take of that, and now you can see the like a progression or whatever you want to say.
That's also true of classical music. Like,
that's true.
When you think about like symphonies, like, you know, Mahler symphonies, like they're just numbered. They have nicknames, but that has come like kind of colloquially, not through the composer's own naming of them. They just happen, you know, most things it is, you know, this person's symphony number this in this key. And that's all you really get in the titling of it.
And that's what's interesting about orchestra music to me, and you can tell us more about this, Matt, is like, a lot of people don't think about this, but classical orchestra music, they don't sit there with like a name, or like, obviously there's not lyrics unless you're doing like some kind of chamber something where there's stuff added. But it's all about feeling and flow and soundscapes, correct? About what you're trying to paint. To some degree.
The thing that fascinates me about classical music often is that, like, very rarely, or definitely in the minority, is it open for interpretation. Like, the piece exists in classical music very much on the page. You know, obviously people memorize things, but like that work exists to be reproduced.
Yeah, that's really cool.
You know, there's, you know, very little improvisation, with exceptions, of course. If people are listening to this and they know a lot about classical music, obviously I'm leaving out things like, you know, what we call figured bass, which is on an organ, like just giving like a roadmap for the way that like the feet pedals on an organ work and stuff like that. That is improvised very much so. But like in symphonic music, like they're just reading off the page. And now you can listen to, you know, 20 different versions of a Bach piece and, you know, performed by different people, and you will say that they all feel a different way, but in their content they are, you know, exactly uniform.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like the part when you said that they're written to be reproduced in some way. That kind of makes me think how we can relate it back to the bonsai perspective, is that the Japanese model was made to be reproduced. So that might be one way to kind of help to like give us a better springboard into how to take what we typically would, feels like you're just reproducing the same image over and over with the left and right branch and, movement into the crown of the tree. But like Matt, you were saying with the classical music model is like these songs are written for people to perform them again and again. And bonsai is kind of just that way. It's like the design model is to be performed again and again. And eventually over time, we'll find a nuance in that tree. And that might be the thing that sets it apart. It's either that, or I think we get to a point where the tree has gotten so old that now the mochikome exists, and then the tree becomes unique because of age as well. So is that kind of a thing that you agree with, Carmen, as far as reproducing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we're not trying to create it exactly, but like you said, the different styles or the, having that kind of rule book in place gives us the opportunity to be able to recreate it. The thing that Matt said that really got me was that it may be played by, like the music may be played by 20 different people, but each one's going to feel different. And I feel like that right there. So if you have 20 semi-cascade junipers, each made by a different person, they're all going to feel different, even though they're all going to be cascade junipers. And I think there's something in that as well that can relate back to bonsai. So maybe we're overthinking it.
Yeah, the classical music thing really simplifies it in a way. I'm glad that we could add that in there as a thought, because it's kind of like, where do I go with this branch? And you're putting it in that certain space, and you're like, okay, this is where it belongs. But is this where it belongs on my rendition of this style? Maybe move it this way or that, or compress it or elongate it. That's going to give it a little bit more of that, that next thing that kind of moves the tree forward from just that style over and over. So,
well, and in 5 years, you might decide to move it to the other side of the tree or change your front. So it's kind of always evolving. And I think part of it too, maybe where our struggle is that we haven't hit that point of mastery yet. Like, I know I'm still struggling through wiring and styling, and, I'm not able to just go out and create something totally new. So I know Mike's been trying to, he's been saying he's trying to create this perfect algorithm to make this perfect tree. And that's a hard thing to do. And, once you get to that mastery level, maybe only then can you really start to break away.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how much mastery do you need? People can go their entire lives doing this, of course, or but when is the breakaway? Because I mean, there's a couple of people that I know of in music. I listen to every once in a while. I listen to like Matt. Have you heard of Chris Tilly?
Yeah, Chris Tilly is one of my favorite musicians.
He's amazing, and and he started out as a child musician.
Yep.
And then he played in Nickel Creek, and then he went on to do Punch Brothers.
That's right. And
then he's gone on to do like his own expressions of classical orchestra music, with like other featured amazing, players. And so when did his mastery come? I mean, no, he's been practicing since he's been a child, but
I mean, it would require listeners to be ultra familiar with his catalog. I mean, I know every work Thiele has ever done, and I've listened to them, hundreds of times. But I would say that his mastery of mandolin playing, not because I recently watched a masterclass he gave with a couple of vocalists about how to sing together, like how people like sing together, and he would say that he, and this is ridiculous in its own way, but that he would say that he's not a singer. I've
heard that before.
That, but really, I think that I guess it's a question of really for someone like Thiele, like, at what point, does being considered by your peers to be probably the finest mandolin player in the world, living at least, does that make you a master? Like, can you be at the pinnacle and not be a master in some sort of way?
I think maybe where I'm thinking mastery comes in is when you don't have to think through every brand, where it starts to come naturally, where you're able to perform the techniques without having to struggle through the techniques. Not necessarily that you are the best of the bester, but that you started to master some of those skills where it becomes muscle memory, and you can just do it without having to think through it too far. But I mean, you'll talk to people who have been like, even the professionals, Michael Hagedorn, Jonas, like all these people are going to still say like, oh, I'm not a master. Like they don't want to be called that because they're still learning as well. But it's a constant, I think with art, it's a constant progression. But at some point you get to that level where you're not learning the skills anymore. You're not, trying to perfect your technique. You have the technique. So now you can move on to whatever is next, that next thought of design or art or, whatever comes after that.
Yeah, but I would say to that sentiment that every baseball player still has to do drills at spring training every year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. even the highest paid, and like the person that won the most valuable player the season before is still running ground ball drills come March. So, and, it would be hard to argue that those people are not masters in that field. And so I think that there's always some, and I think that way as a musician too, like I probably for the past year or so, I've been in a terrible habit of not really doing much bass practicing, and I can feel it. Like I can feel that in my hands when I play. Like I'm still not like ruining gigs through being sloppy, but like, I know that it could be that much better. Yet I've been a professional, full-time employed bass player for 15 years at this point.
Right. Yeah. You can just never stop, I guess.
Yeah, I think that, and again, some of that comes down to intentionality and, maintenance and things like that. And, man, I was going to say something else, and then I had said about the classical thing. Oh, you were talking about culture, about like Japanese culture would say this, and then kind of being about how Americans produce a more individualistic style, which leads me to the question of, if you don't live and abide your life by a culture, are you bound to it in its in its productivity? Like, can American bonsai really be equivalent to Japanese bonsai because American practitioners are not steeped instinctively in that?
That's a really good question, because I'm not saying that there aren't Japanese bonsai professionals that try to produce stuff that you would see similar to a Japanese bonsai garden. There are a few. I don't know a bunch on top of my head. I know a few that you would go to their gardens. For instance, the first person I think of is like with Jonas, where he produces Japanese pines from seed. And so he's got a model that he builds those trees off of, and he's got a lot of, formal, informal uprights, cascades, windsweeps or literatis, and he's kind of got them categorized and has been producing these for years. And so, but then the other guys are doing more individual stuff. And so that is a really tough thing to say. And I do not want to be the,
that's a minefield. I know that it's a minefield to ask it in the first place.
Yeah, you put your foot straight in your mouth in certain aspects of that.
But I'm not in the echo chamber, so I get to come in and just throw a hand grenade and be like,
oh no.
No, I love that. I think that's great. I don't think that American bonsai is never going to be Japanese bonsai. Growing up in Japanese culture, there are just things and words and traditions and just bits of this culture that we will never get because we didn't grow up that way. We don't have the same understanding of that culture. So how we do and understand bonsai is always going to be different. And I think we can take the techniques and we can learn the techniques and apply them to the best of our ability to create something that looks like Japanese bonsai. And we can spend a ton of time, learning Japanese culture. But I think unless you're actually there and in it all the time, you're probably never going to you're not going to do Japanese bonsai just because you're not Japanese, or you weren't raised in Japan with that culture.
I certainly don't think that. I was going to say, I don't think that it's genetic. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. Is like,
it's not genetic. It's just a matter of
full immersion.
Just hearing the word wabi sabi, we don't have anything that directly translates. That it's a feeling more than a word for us. So like we might not ever be able to fully grasp what that means, just because in our culture we don't have really that idea. So I think it's just that kind of thing that's going to always divide, bonsai of the world versus Japanese bonsai. But I think the techniques translate, and so we can kind of create our, to our best understanding, something that is similar to what's happening there.
I think the only word I can think of that we use to describe things that are old is patina. Kind of the only word that comes to mind, unless there's some other. I mean, you guys know how awesome I am with my first language and understanding how to articulate. But no, patina is a decent word for describing it, but I feel like that's used a little bit more way of like antique and inanimate objects is more what that is. There's also like the weather-worn kind of like passages of time kind of look, but there's no one word to describe that, because whenever
like a time-space phenomenon instead of a
well, because one thing that gives me the feeling that wabi sabi is like because I'm in the Southeast American, there's a lot of old barns, very like sun-beaten, painted old barns that you can there's no denying that that's old. And also you can see the craftsmanship in some of the old farm tools laying around. And you pick up those items and someone's like, oh, that has a good patina to it. But then patina is kind of like, it makes me think of a little bit like, what's the value of it? And that's not a thing that they use in bonsai too often. You don't say that's got wabi sabi and then someone's like dollar signs. Like patina feels like that is too aimed at that kind of. So I mean, if there's another word, if you guys can think of, but that's the only one that comes to mind for me.
Oh, no, I looked it up. I mean, because I know the word, but I just wanted to look it up. And this definition here is a surface appearance of something grown beautiful, especially with age or use. That is for patina.
Yeah, and that's probably the closest we got. Unless, I mean, I know the people in the Discord have been very active. They've been really into these long-winded kind of talks with this. And if you guys pick up on that, if there's a word y'all can think of, just slip it in there and tag me, Carmen, Mike, Matt, and we can refer back to it. But yeah, I would love to get some better words to use when describing bonsai, especially since we're talking about like American culture in bonsai. It's going to be different as it develops, undeniably, because I mean, just with the way that like European bonsai, I think is beautifully developing into their own culture of how they style their trees. And they're ahead of us. I think they're ahead of us by like a couple of decades.
Yeah, I would say.
And I mean, some of the stuff there, it's very distinct. You can see the way that they're approaching it. So yeah, I think it's moving along. But it'll never be Japanese, like it'll be Japanese influenced forever. But Japan only got bonsai after Beijing kind of like came and went in vogue. So and Beijing still exists, but bonsai is still a weird thing that we're all kind of still guessing at in a way like that. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I've struggled with it a lot in conversations surrounding, like, you know, cultural appropriation. I'm going to go there. Like, for a while I was like, wait, am I even supposed to be doing this? But because it's, you know, it's being encouraged and shared from a lot of the Japanese artists, you know, it seems like it's an art that wants to be shared and wants to be explored. And, you know, that's given me some more confidence in doing bonsai. But there was a time where I questioned whether or not I should even be, you know, trying it. But I think it's beyond that point, you know, now.
I'm a little too deep now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But also, like, you know, it's become a worldwide thing. It's not just that we've seen this thing and we're trying to copy it or take it or something like that. Now it's a whole worldwide phenomenon that that's bringing people together. So
I think it's so funny that it's so worldwide now and there's not another name for it, because some things that get around do develop new names when it changes hands in different cultures too. And bonsai is just not one of those things. It's very weird to me.
I would say, I think that to talk about something like cultural appropriation, which, I mean, I would be, you know, pretty at the front of the pack of being like, no, this is worth considering. But one, I think that awareness, you know, like awareness versus ignorance is such a big key. And a couple things about that are like, really, that respect is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that I would imagine that if there were to be an established, you know, American style of bonsai, like eventually if that develops and someone like can like look at a tree and say, oh, that's an American expression of that. If the bonsai artists who are Americans also respect the different like forms around the world, like, then that's not problematic. That isn't problematic. And also like understanding history and things like that. You know, Americans have a hard problem with history sometimes because, you know, our history, if we go by it defining us, is only 250 years old. Whereas if you go other places, you're talking about thousands of years, and you know, they are required to know those things at that depth, and like we don't have, you know, Carmen, we're talking about space and time, and like that's a whole thing too. Like our perception of historical space and time via our culture is relatively small, and so it takes using the spare rooms of your mind to fill up things like understanding historical context for things and development and respect those things in your change of them, which is some of the same thing about talking about like the cosmic bonsai thing of, we're not saying like that you need to have solid technique, you know, because people are going to want to, you know that at the end of the day. It's no different than, I mean, my wife is a chef, and, you know, like, so we're both really into fine dining, and talking about like, you know, if you have a great dish that's full of like incredible flavors and all these things, but the, you know, and it's like a slice of like a pork loin, but if that pork loin's overcooked, then like no matter how creative it is, it's a shitty dish. And so like I think that applies in a lot of different, you know, spots too. It's no different than like there is something about music too where it's like a song can be great, and maybe there's a little more wiggle room in this because I can think of so many examples, but like if something's out of tune, something's out of tune. You know, and like that's hard to like ignore and stuff like that. So like having a respect for things and in the branching away from them, I think is like a big step. And again, that's like intention and things like that. And
that's one of the places that I struggle with, because I love when people do things outside of the rules and outside of the box and try something different, but I feel like it has to be within a certain range of appropriateness, because you can go too far and you kind of sense this, I don't know if it's a lack of respect, but it almost gets kitschy, you know?
Yeah.
but there's a way to do it that really also works. So finding kind of that balance of doing something different to break away versus doing something different for the sake of just doing something,
Yeah. So you guys still feel good about that?
I think so. I mean, we're not going to solve these problems.
No. I mean, we're at a point where, we're letting
Talking
it
in circles.
No, we're letting it kind of melt down into easier.
I'm not gonna lie, I re-listened to that episode twice, that section of it that we were talking with Mike about all this stuff, because it's, I don't know, it's where a lot of my interest in bonsai lies, is this kind of philosophical part of it and the cultural how it relates to to us in different ways and to different people in different ways. And so I don't know, I could just go deep dive it forever. It's pretty fun.
Well, and we've had a lot of positive feedback on these types of content episodes. And I mean, we'll just for our listeners, if this is your first episode, I've said this in the past, I'm just like, sorry if you're getting into this show and you're like, oh, beginner bonsai podcast. Oh, what?
Oh.
And so, but yeah, just know that this has been something, and this is a big part of the reason why I wanted to start doing this show, is that I've wanted to bring, myself and my bonsai friends, and Matt's a great outside perspective, so bring Matt into the mix too, and we can talk about these things, and then we can talk about techniques and species and forms and have guests, and then we can revisit these types of conversations every once in a while and see how we approach it as we go on with time. Time's only going to really gauge how you hear us talking. I mean, down the line, hopefully our visions in our the way that we approach bonsai will change, because that's kind of one of the things that I'm kind of getting from these types of conversations and other conversations I've had with multiple other people who practice bonsai and other arts. I love mixing in other art forms in here too, and we should do this more often, where we have Matt's musician perspective, and we should get other people that do other art forms, like maybe a ceramicist and a painter, and other people like that, just so they can kind of share the process. Because I mean, there really is, it's all process, and some arts may not look like process arts, but I feel like because of the way we talked about mastery earlier with talking about Chris, how do you say his last name?
Thiele.
Yeah. By the way, if anybody out there likes music just in general, please go look up his stuff. I mean, Chris, and then his last name is Thile.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, go look him up. I know there's a lot of bluegrass playing in there, but bluegrass is kind of the foundation of American music,
Super
so
fun.
Don't judge it. Yeah, it's really awesome music. But yeah, like, refer back to that kind of stuff again and again, and then check in with us maybe months from now, a year from now, see how we feel about these conversations. But would you guys want to do a couple of listener critiques and questions real quick? I know Matt, don't feel like you're out of place, because I think an outsider perspective is also key, in my opinion. Me and Carmen have talked about this in the class.
I love having other folks on who, especially other artists or people in adjacent kind of fields, just to discuss the things that we might not necessarily think about, or to find those connections between the arts or the processes and all of that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I would say about that, like, feel is also a good word in a lot of this, as like we like transition from that conversation into this, because like the only thing that I can think to do of like being involved in a tree critique with you guys is like look at these and think how they make me feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course it becomes a thing of like, if I see something that's like way different, as someone who doesn't really know what it is I'm looking at, I think that some people who are like have blinders on about an art form would be prone to say like no, you're looking at it wrong. And it's like, how do you judge that? Unless you're not going to show it to people.
Yeah, I think this would be a really good topic to have an episode on, actually, about how to critique trees and how to look at them, because I feel there's two very distinct ways to do it. And one is, your impression. What do you feel? What is it? What's your what's the impact? And then the other is, okay, strictly speaking, based on quality, where does it fall on the scale of quality? Because you can really like something and it can rank like a 3 or a 4, out of 10. Or there can be something that's, the perfect tree and it gives you nothing, you're just like, yeah, that's nice, but whatever. So I think it's an important distinction to make.
Yeah. Here's the thing. This is like the music producer and me coming out in the way that like I work with people who are trying to, that like we're working on a record or songs or something like, unless something like, even if something like this exists, I would challenge you guys to like come up with something like this. Like imagine you were doing a bonsai show that, that's just local and you had to come up with a pamphlet to give people who know nothing about bonsai of like what they should be looking at. Like
jotting that down.
Yeah. Like
Matt's
what would be
guy.
On like a one, like on a one sheet. Like what are the things that not necessarily are instructive, but like more with as little technical information as possible, like how a tree should affect, an observer. So think about that.
Nice.
No, I like that a lot. And maybe we can use that rating chart. We can come up with our own, because I've heard a couple of different professionals and other people who do bonsai judge trees and have like a very particular way they judge them at shows or the way they approach them. And so I think Little Things needs its own kind of categorization or judging kind of thing. We're going to start off with a handful of trees. All the trees that we're going to be talking about are going to be on our Instagram. They're going to be labeled for what episode they are linked to. So in case of a new listener and they don't get the rhythm of how the show kind of goes with the critiques, they're on our Instagram page, and under the description, I'll tell you exactly what episode we're referring to on these. Okay, so I sent them kind of out of order a little bit, but these are trees from our Discord, and so I went out and made a call for critiques. I was like, guys, don't be shy. I know it seems intimidating because we've critiqued a couple of trees that were at the national show. We've critiqued trees that were at the ABS show, and then I've got a couple of random ones here and there, but now that everyone's kind of warmed up to it, we've gotten a few trees that, and I said, don't be shy. We don't have to look at trees that can be perceived as like showable either. We can give advice on trees that are like obviously in development and they just want a little more pointers with their trees. So the first one we're looking at is going to be the Portulacaria afro with the tape measure back next to it. This one was submitted by Ricky Ruins quite some time ago. And when I did a call for trees, I was like, who's got some critiques? And he was like, oh, I posted a while back, but it looks like you overlooked it. I'm like, oh, crap. So
you ignored it on purpose.
I did not ignore it. I did not.
Whatever.
We're doing it now. So, but yeah, we're looking at looks like a previously styled, it would be into the pre-bonsai stage. We got a little cute Portulacaria afro here. It looks like it's roughly around 4.5 inches tall because we got a great tape measure perspective there. I did a call for like an updated image of this tree, but we're just going to go ahead and run it and spin in the Discord for a minute.
He assumed you weren't going to look at it, so why would he send an updated image?
There you go.
Wow. Yo, Evan's a jerk. Let's just put that out right now. No. This is, I love this species, so it's not like I don't want to talk about Portulacaria afro. I do work with them a lot, and I do see a lot of them. And I was told by someone recently that this is actually not suitable for bonsai, and I wanted to slap their hand and say, no, you're wrong. Don't ever say that again. Like get those words out your mouth.
Bonsai. I don't know what the.
So this is kind of the thing with Portulacaria afro that I kind of see is like, it's like junipers and pines have always kind of looked at like the end all be all, like fine, high end. And then deciduous trees are always kind of like, there could be really nice deciduous bonsai, but, they're always kind of struggling. It feels like they're kind of limping behind the pines and the junipers. Sometimes they're like, ooh, please let me have a best in show award, So they had to give the deciduous trees their own category, best deciduous tree, best winter silhouette show. And And then you got tropicals, and then you have this whole range of tropicals. There's beautiful tropicals. There's buttonwoods. There's I was wiring an Esconbrone earlier, and I was having a great time getting scratched to shit by it. And there's, we got Desmodium and sea hibiscus and all these great species, and it kind of funnels down. And then you have Portucaria afra, which is the dwarf jade, sometimes confused as a cactus. But a lot of people don't get to see this tree for what it is. And a lot of the trees we see are beginner material because they are very accessible. It's something that's used in a lot of bonsai workshops. It's used in a lot of beginner, like people come to the nursery and they look at, what will I not kill? And I love that question. It's like, because they come in and they're like, oh, what tree will I not kill? How easy is this to kill? That was a question I got. I know I'm kind of talking wide circle again. But I got a question at I did a parish fair, what we call a parish. Y'all call a county. Other places call like a province, whatever you want to call it. I remember I was talking to Laurent. It was like, what do you call a section of France? And I can't remember what the word he used was. It's I can't remember. I'm sure other people in other countries are laughing at me right now. But we call it the parish. So I was like the parish fair, and this woman came up to me and she was like, how easy is it to kill this? And I was like, what a question.
I mean, how badly do you want to kill it? Because it can be a lot easier if you really want it to die.
I was like, I mean, if your intention,
you could run it over with your car. Like, that's pretty fast. But like, if you're talking like how long can you slowly let it die on your windowsill, that's a different story.
Yeah, and that was funny to me is because it's like even with Portucaria afra, I mean, you could run it over with your car, but as long as there's like pieces that
probably would still grow.
Exactly. If there's pieces still together.
You just multiplied it by 100 is what you've done.
Yeah, you squish it and it has every branch and leaf. It can be something new. So I'm like, it's always my favorite question is like, what can you do to this tree to abuse it to the point of just destruction?
How far is too far?
You were going to say something, Matt?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
Although I was thinking about the amount of times that while I'm listening through episodes, editing them, and I hear one of you say like, no, don't do that. And it probably, to me, sounds like a very minor thing. And it's like, what things are like, no, don't do that, but also won't like kill a tree?
Because like I was showing Carmen like a picture of a tree that I was repotting just to fulfill a couple hours ago, whatever. And it's a Yopon holly. And she's like, wow, you can repot that now? And I'm like, technically, I can.
Well, technically you can repot something whenever, but...
Exactly. I run a bonsai nursery and I need to do it now. Yeah. But also, I know how to make it survive. So that's one of the things I always kind of try to clarify with this, especially being a beginner's study kind of podcast show is kind of like, it's like, do what I say, but don't do as I do kind of thing. But like at the same time, like I'm going to do my best to explain it. But anyway, this Portucaria, this is obviously fresh stock. It's just gotten done. It looks like it's in a twin trunk or a two trunk style. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward here in my opinion. Just make sure that you establish your first branch on this tree. I don't know there's like a branch like next to the tape measure itself. It's a little unclear because this background is not the best to view a bonsai. But that branch on the right, it looks like it's trying to become another trunk, which I think is interesting because, now you're going from double trunk to almost like a clump style kind of thing going on here. And I think that's kind of like, this is too early to really push the envelope of like, you should have done this to fix the crown. I think the first thing for me to say is make sure you're establishing your style before we look at branches that kind of do weird things like this. It's kind of like, is that going too far, becoming more of a clump, or is it trying to be a two trunk tree? Because your trunks are also very similar in trunk diameter as well. There's a little bit of a problem too. So make sure we kind of lower the height of the second trunk. That's supposed to be the mother-daughter kind of style of double trunks. Make sure that the prominent trunk is taller and stays the tallest. I know it's not tall now, but the weight of that smaller tree is a little too much too.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the tree there, or the trunk on the left, is a little bit heavy. But I don't think that you can really make that much smaller without making it too, because it's already a very small tree. So I would recommend making that center trunk thicker and maybe a little bit taller, because the branch on the right, I like it, but I think it's a little bit too heavy compared with the middle trunk. So, but it's a really cute little tree. I like the overall shape of it. The overall movement of it is really nice for a little portulacaria. So I think it's a good tree. It just needs a little bit of balancing.
You have any questions or any insights, Matt?
I like that it's chunky. I think that gives it character. Like in the trunks, I think, and obviously having no idea what the rules are like, that like large branch you're talking about off to the right there, if that grew out to be like another trunk kind of thing, would give it sort of a like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys treehouse kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Like an upper level, like an upper deck kind of thing. Is this tree like, are you guys considering it like still growing in a way before it's like really like stylized?
Yeah, that was kind of the beginning of it, was like this is still early. The next
I was just thinking there's some leaves off on like the right side or the left side of this photo that like draw the eye way down to like the surface of the pot.
Yeah, that's like, called that's what me and Carmen were referring to earlier. I heard her say weight. When we say there's too much weight, we're referring to a foliage pad or a section being heavy.
Cool.
And it does draw our eye, because when bonsai, the one thing that we always look at, and I've heard this from a couple of other practitioners, is I love hearing it's like the first thing that us as human beings look at when we see trees is we look at the alive section of the plant first, because we want to see that. Because if it's dead, it's not interesting to us. We're like, oh, that's just a dried up stick. But if it's got green on it, our eyes instantly go to it, and we're like, oh wait, there's stuff going on here. This is alive, And so, yeah, that weight definitely. And it's still young.
I was just thinking of it in terms of like movement, like seeing like movement throughout the green in it. But that if you sort of look at it like if you start from where that branch on the right goes off, looking at those leaves there, like next to the tape measure, and then come counterclockwise, then it seems like those leaves, like you're looking too low. But again, that's why I asked if it was, not necessarily like composed for style quite yet, because then I would feel like you'd.
Yeah, it's very, very young. Yeah. So like with the next tree we're going to look at, which is actually it's going to be the 3-point display with the Kusamono, the portulacaria kind of like leaning over it. It doesn't have any leaves. This is something, I think this is a good transition. So we can talk more with you, Matt, and get some better perspectives from outside on this. Is that every once in a while, tropicals are flexible in this manner. You can defoliate them or just remove all their leaves and really show off form, line, and any kind of ramification, or ramifications referring to bifurcation in the branching that really makes it more look like a tree branch and less like just like a twig sticking out from the trunk. So it gives you that appearance of, oh, this is actually a tree in, so it kind of sets you up for that. So you guys see the image of the blue backdrop? Okay. So this is also
the list. Sorry. I was going to say, looking through like the list of them, I actually found this image to be the most like compelling.
And so this is the going to be a really interesting one. I feel like this one's going to drag us out for a good while, because this is, let me see who submitted this really quick. This is another one of our Discord listeners, or one of our Bonsai Best Buds, AC Castle. So he used this for the BSF convention. I believe that's the Florida convention. And he has a couple of different images that he submitted. of it. He's got one where he's got the same 3-point display, but it's like a really moody, dark image. And he's got another one where he's got the tree. Looks like it's all like this like concrete,
like a
kind of
concrete
like
stanchion,
stumpy thing, kind of giving it like that, that really even more mood. And I think that's, like he was like, what do you guys think of this? And he says the statue's name is End of the Trail. Accent is dead on purpose. So the grass is a browned grass. And he says, have at it, no hard feelings. So I know, Carmen, you wanted to say some things, but I want to kind of hear what Matt's take on this would be a little bit, so we can get that outside perspective and kind of bounce off of his ideas, and then we can kind of go into it a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was just trying to find, I know that I've definitely seen that sculpture before, the End of the Trail sculpture.
And
it's, it is a Native American piece of art. I don't know that the artist is, but it depicts a Native American, person. I almost want to say that it's a Beach Boys record that there's a painting of it on. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What's the term for like the, that statue and the grass near it?
So usually whenever you're displaying stuff in a display like this in a professional setting, it's either the grass would be a kusamono, which means wild grass thing, literally. Carmen, is there a name for like a statuary?
There is, and I don't know it off the top of my head.
Well, there is a terminology for it, but in a 3-point display, this is done well in the point that everything has its own stand and different elevations. So that's got a point to it. But yeah.
Usually you don't do a kusamono and a statue.
Yeah, it's a little
in the same
unusual
display, but I can see I think there's an intent with how this is displayed that is, in this case, stronger than following whatever the rules are of bonsai display.
Yeah. By the way, it is a Beach Boys album. It is the Beach Boys album called Surf's Up, which surprisingly has a song on it called A Day in the Life of a Tree.
Oh, sweet.
But the thing that
I have to look that up.
The thing that it gives to me is like, I am kind of drawn to that kusamono and the statue. Like the tree is like pointing my attention towards those.
Man.
Like primarily, and then like I'm referring back to the tree and looking at sort of the way it is. The tree itself kind of gives me like a dragon-y vibe.
Yeah.
Visually. I mean, those are the things that like, as I look at this.
Oh shoot, I just saw a dragon in it. I'm never going to unsee that.
There are
Sorry,
dragon
did I ruin it?
Bonsai.
Did I ruin it for everybody?
You enhance the look of the tree. It's a different perspective.
Yeah, look at me go.
Yeah.
But that's sort of, I mean, those are my like initial visceral things.
And
I mean, obviously seeing this, like the process my brain went through was seeing the statue, knowing I'd seen it somewhere before, and then being right about where I'd seen it, and then, watching. No, I take that back. I was obviously looking at the tree first because, I mean, I'm guesting on a bonsai podcast. Obviously, I'd be looking at the tree first, but then watching it, immediately throw my attention, because that's sort of like, that's a good word for it. Like that tree, like throws or flings my attention at the kusamono and the statue, and then like I come back to it and see that. But so, in a moment of synergy here, the thing that I think about this is, of you saying how like when we look at trees as humans, like we're drawn to the like alive bits, and this, until I started looking at trees, because of you guys, I had never considered that bonsai would have no leaves. And so looking at that like gives me a whole different vibe and feeling than looking at something like the last one that had a bunch of, plumpy, fun leaves on it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing with this, is that they have this species. It's the same species as the last plant we just looked at, but they've just taken the leaves off, and so they're using this tree to basically warp the viewer's view of it. It's like, this is no longer a Portulacaria. This is something else. This is something a little bit more abstract. They're trying to tell a story a little bit more here. But before I get into that too much, what do you think, Carmen, personally with it? Not personally, but artistically, or whatever you want to call it.
I think, like I said before, I think this composition is more of a statement than necessarily about the individual bonsai, which is fine. And I think that's one of the things that bonsai can do as a form of art, is to share, is to make a statement and to tell a story. And I think the story might be a little on the nose, but I think it's very impactful. The tree itself, I'm trying to look a little bit closer. I think the two thick branches coming off of the top are throwing me off a bit. I feel like the directionality of the tree is more towards the left, but those two branches are kind of heavy and too heavy to the right. So maybe keeping something up there for balance, but maybe making the canopy go a little bit off more towards the left. The thing that throws me the most is that because it's a Portulacaria afra and it's showing the scene of something that I would think of as like prairie of the United States. So I don't know that the tree is the right species to tell this story, but because it has no leaves, I think it kind of works. So I'm a little bit torn on it. I feel this, like I can very clearly feel what the artist is trying to say here, but I don't know that the pieces all work together overall.
And yeah, I mean,
see, my untrained eye tells me that it feels like a full composition to me.
Yeah, I think it does, and like I said, I think it's successful in making its statement. Bonsai display generally tries to be a little bit more subtle, but again, this is not showing a traditional Japanese display, so we tend to be a little more on the nose, and I think that's okay because we all understand what he's saying here.
Yeah. Apart from it being very deliberate in its message, just looking at it technically, like, as far as proportions and stuff, that's one of my things I always look at in bonsai displays is everything kind of put together, in a way that the craftsmanship is shown through the way that they have arranged these pieces. Because I feel like with the tree that the stand's on,
the stand that the tree is on.
Yep, I said it backwards. I was getting ahead of myself. The stand that the tree is on, if there was a tree with a stand on it and you can make it work, I think that would be amazing. By the way, someone try to start working on it now. But no, the stand is very, very straightforward. I feel like if you're going to do something elaborate with a lot of pieces, that the stand should be more present in this and draw more to the pot, which the pot, in my opinion, is not really the correct shape for the movement and the texture and the bark color here.
Yeah.
So I would just I would definitely get the tree up higher. If it's going to be in the distance as it's suggested in the story that's being told, it really needs to be up and far. And the container, it looks like there's some other dead grasses in there to really try to draw the tree to the other pieces, and I don't think the grasses in the pot are all that necessary. If you had more surface in that pot, if you had more of a landscape style container, then yeah, you would have more room for that kind of stuff, but it feels like it's kind of all just stuck in there. And whenever you have a really square stand, then you should have a organic shaped stand for your kusamono. I think that even though you have a root style stand for your figurine there, it still feels a little too similar. I know that it's like the root stand has like the kind of biologic feet kind of thing going on there, and then the grass is on a flat kind of cut piece, but they're both the same shape and the same size. And I just feel like this story could have been told without one of the two pieces. So, maybe use a scroll instead that showed the North American, in some other different manner, or even the grasses. There's just a few things here, but yeah, it's not a bad tree. I mean, the tree does have its own proportion and balance that is nice. It's, even with all the movement, it doesn't feel like it's falling over. But I did put the other image where there's a little bit more of a moodier thing where the tree has leaves on it. And I feel like maybe the image, it was taken at a different angle, and it shows that top branch that shoots back the other way.
Mm-hmm. I like the one that has leaves on it better.
Yeah.
I feel like the tree itself is more balanced in that.
Yeah.
And I think the stand choices are nicer there for the statue. And then I think having the Jita under the Kusumono in this would make sense. Maybe a very small, dark Jita, so that it's very subtle. Yeah,
but I still feel like the Kusumono and the figure are just too similar in proportion.
Mm-hmm. I think pick one would work, just to be more subtle with the display there.
I would love to see this the way that it is with the blue backdrop, but photographed the way the darker and moodier one is.
And here's the thing with, sorry to cut you off, Carmen.
I was just going to say, I'd love to see it with 6 full feet of space, or 8 full feet of, I'd love to see it spread out, how they would do it more in a traditional display. I want this tiny display. I want more space between the elements.
Yeah, and it is another thing too, is like, I was thinking about this whenever I heard Matt say, I like the blue backdrop, but want it to be photographed a certain way. For certain shows, there are certain selections of, like, at Nationals, I think there was just black. And then you have like a curtain drawn on the sides. Mm-hmm. Other shows, like, I remember at one point, I can't remember what year it was, but Ryan Neal did his Artisans Cup. Is that what that was the name of?
Yeah.
The Artisans Cup, I mean. Mm-hmm. And that show was like staged really, it was dark, and all the trees had
in an
light
art
shot on
museum with lighting. It was very particular.
Yeah, I was about to say, what is really a thing to me about the version of this with leaves on it is the way it's lit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Like that, I mean, that's the thing about painting, right? Or anything. Photography, painting, anything is like the way the light is. So seeing it against that blue background, like, and obviously this has nothing to do with like the way, AC is like styling it, but I am so compelled by the tree without leaves, but I'm compelled by the lighting in the other photo.
Yeah.
See, that's so interesting, because that's another angle of looking at bonsai as art, because when you see it in display in a room, it should give you an impact, but we're getting a bigger impact here from a staged image with different certain lighting, which is, so that's like bonsai as photography. So how do you compare the two? It's just,
for sure.
Yeah.
My brain's blowing up.
That's the kind of perspectives that we need. But let's move on to the next one. It was submitted by, let's see, let me go down. It's submitted by Backyard Bonsai Australia. So this is a tree that's in early development. It's the one that's got like a nice little kink in the trunk, and it's in a simple square-shaped pot. He's telling me that it is and I'm the one who should say this because I'm amazing at pronunciations. So he's got it laid out here phonetically for me. Melaleuca.
Melaleuca. Yep, it's a tea tree. Alternifolia.
Yep. What's the common name for this one?
A tea tree. So like tea tree oil that you like.
This is it.
I don't know if this is the tea tree. But it's in that family. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, I'll go first on this one. But yeah, just right off the bat, I mean, this tree is in early development as well, and this was something that he wanted to specify. He's like, this is a native, but he's like, I want you guys to see it and kind of tell me what you guys would, start teasing out of this to pretty much make the design. So it's something to me personally. I like to see people use trees from their own range. And I know Australia, there's a lot of crazy trees that I don't really get to see a whole lot of. And I wish that there was more club shows where they just take pictures. I don't care what level the bonsai are at. I just want to see the other species. I want to see what's going on over there because they've got a lot of really interesting stuff. And this tree, I'm guessing tea trees, this looks like it's a conifer from what it appears.
It's I guess you would say it's not a conifer, but it's
like
really it's a real narrow leaf. It
okay, but it's
almost
evergreen.
like it's very fine, kind of like a willow almost. When you see them full size, they're
so this has the tendency to be like the leaves are great because they're so small, but they actually are leaves. It's the image is a little
it's hard to
compressed.
tell. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this species is really brittle and Carmen, didn't you tell me about you had somebody in Australia in your family?
Mm-hmm. My brother lives there.
Okay, so you've been there a handful of times, so you've probably seen these in person.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about this particular species.
Okay, and I mean,
I've seen a few of them from is it Tree Makers? There's another Australian group that posts some of these.
I mean, this is my first time seeing one, and it's unfortunate that I would love to see one of these in person, but I probably never will. But the reason why I'm asking and saying that is that is like usually whenever I approach a new tree like this, I want to see what is it capable of. Like, are these fragile? Are they brittle? Because if it's brittle, I can understand. Like, if you want to wire it out, you'll be a little bit less adamant to put some serious compression in those branches. Because my first instinct when I look at that trunk is it's got that really nice, just like comes up and it kinks suddenly and has a nice dramatic, just straight shot into the trunk line. And my first approach would be getting that movement and replicating that movement in some of the branches, especially early on in the trunk, especially if it's going to be the first branch. But if the tendency for this tree is to be brittle and to grow up and out, then if it's going to be a native approach, like I do with some, a lot of my stuff here with the bulk cypresses and the elms and stuff that I deal with, then if there's a way that it needs to be approached in that manner, then I guess it could be done and just in a way that I'm not familiar with Australian bonsai. But one of the things that stands out to me, if it's going to be more of a native or a true to form, is that if you come up that trunk and you see where he's got it wired a little bit, and you come up to the right, and there's those branches that drop down and just go nice and lateral with the ground. You guys see what I'm saying there? Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. The way those branches kind of just naturally lay down, and then they give kind of like a triangle shape on their own. So if the intention is to keep the tree tall and kind of just maybe this is its growth habit, then try laying all those other branches out in a similar manner and kind of building that, giving that feeling throughout the rest of the branch structure and the canopy. And I don't know what the capability of this tree is. If you cut it back, if it will back bud off of nothing, if it's truly like a boxwood or an azalea, if it's capable of that, or if it's more like a conifer where if you cut something off, you're kind of like screwed. So I think it would be interesting in that way. What do you think, Carmen?
So how I've seen these before and how I kind of think of them naturally is kind of like how you would find a larch in a bog or something. So kind of like
straight up and kind of out a little bit.
Not totally straight, maybe like slanted or kind of craggy or, something that's been a little bit beaten up. So the thing about this tree is that it looks like it was wired to have that kink in the base, which is cool. That's a cool movement. But I think if that's the thing that hold on, here's what am I trying to say? I think if you can't manipulate the trunk above that kink into a bend, that you have to cut it off and just work with the two thin branches that are left. Because I there's no taper there. It's very straight. It doesn't match the trunk line that's already there. But if you can get a bend in it, you'll be able to move it and try to mimic some of that other movement from lower down up into the tree and then go from there. But if you can't get that to bend, then I personally would probably cut it off and try to regrow canopy from the lower, more bendable branches that you have further down the tree. But I also don't know if this one backbuds or how bendy it is. I can't remember from the one time that I've encountered it. Not as a bonsai, just as a plant in a garden.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish I knew the species better, but I think that it might be too far. It's already got that wire bend in the trunk, so I don't know that you can do a full natural style with it. So I just would try to continue going with those curves.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's another thing too, is if it is capable of backbutting, one of the best things you can do is, I know it's in a bonsai container, and that's you may have obtained this piece like that, or maybe you put it in there, but you could put it into a slightly larger container and do a big cut and then really encourage it.
Get a lot of backbutting and then grow from there. If
it's possible. But yeah, what you think, Matt?
A couple things. This first comment is kind of a 2-for-1 because I didn't say it at the end of the last tree. That tree that we were just talking about that AC posted. I would love for him to, in the Discord, elaborate on what his intention of that whole display was. And I would also say about this tree, because it's what you're talking about, I would love if whoever submitted this tree would find a photo of what like a great example of a matured and styled tree in the species would be like.
Yeah.
Like I would love that, which is also a shameless plug for anyone that listens to this podcast that isn't a patron and in the Discord. Because
come to the Discord.
Yeah, the casual listener will not get those things. So if you want enriched content, please become a patron and join the Discord. But in terms of what I feel like about this tree, looking at it, it reminds me of an animated tree that is like personified as like it almost gives me like a Fantasia style like choreography tree.
It's got arms, and you just need googly eyes.
It has arms, and it looks like it's like doing a dance kind of thing. And that
I have some drawings to do on top of these trees after Matt's been talking about them, because I can see all kinds of stuff on them now.
Yeah, and you can watch like the way that like the trunk kind of knurls around. That it's sort of like imagine it being like a tree that is personified like as a woman with like an old style like skirt where like the back kind of like comes out. Like that is that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
But that, for all the things that, so like, for you guys, this is young and it's in development and all that, but like it's evocative as it is here too. So that is sort of like I can't look away from that.
Yeah.
You can't look away from the ladies' bustle.
Yes, that's what thank you.
You're welcome.
That in all joking aside on that too, is like because of how many curves this tree is, that just directly goes to the feminine style, because there are feminine and masculine styles in bonsai, and that's something that has to be really paid attention to. So if this tree is very feminine in its appearance, then usually feminine trees have more curves in their branches, and foliage is not so much of a thing that should stand out. The foliage should be thinned out more. There should be a lighter presence of the foliage on the frame of the tree, whereas where the masculine tree would be, bold and have like, sharp taper and angle and more angular branches with like heavy foliage. And then there's mixes of that. So yeah, I could see the feminine qualities in this for sure. I mean, that kink in that movement right there, that's a very feminine quality, especially how rounded it is. It doesn't have any dead wood. It doesn't have any hard 90s anywhere. It's a nice smooth transition.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know it's a lot.
No, I'm just trying to keep it clean.
Oh. We are looking at trees, mind you.
Oh boy.
Thick thighs save lives.
Anyway, so if now that we got that out of our systems, so if we've got some time, you guys got probably about 10, 20 minutes left. Y'all good?
Yeah, it's fine by me.
So I did say in the previous episode, like, yeah, we're critiquing trees or being hard on some of these trees. It may seem like we don't want to sound like we're jerks. So,
I mean, I can be harder.
Oh,
but I won't.
That's what she said.
Oh,
no,
God.
not she. That's a he.
Oh. Anyway, now that we went from a PG rating to a PG-13.
I'm gonna. Don't worry.
So yeah, we were saying how like we seem so critical on other works on other trees. So the next image is one of my bald cypresses, and I'm gonna step back and kind of see.
Oh boy!
You know, I know there's some things I have to say myself, but this was a first run for this tree. I showed it at the Louisiana Day of Bonsai. This was probably 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. Everything's running together because I've been running around so much recently with little mini shows and stuff like this. But yeah, I'm not going to hold any punches on how I feel about my own work as well. I remember just a little insight too. Jennifer Price was at this show and she was the featured artist. And she'd asked me to go through and critique some of the trees at the show with her, and we got to this and I was like, well, wouldn't it so happen that my tree was here and we're going to talk about it? And one of the things she said to me, she's like, oh, it's hard to critique your own work, huh? And I was like, no, not at all.
Oh, it's so easy to critique my own work.
It's so easy.
It's all garbage.
Hate.
I'll show you exactly what's wrong with it and where. Sorry, go ahead.
What did you say, Matt?
I said hate.
Oh, hate. But anyway, so Matt, what do you think? I want to hear your perspective, and then
which one is it?
It's going to be the one that's a bald cypress on a stone slab, and it's got pitcher plants to the left of it.
It's on the red cloth.
Yeah, okay. That's what I need to know. Don't use fancy bonsai words with me.
He doesn't know what bald cypress is.
Don't tell me directly what the plant is. Just tell me what the background looks like.
Just because you're Mr. Bald Cypress.
Anyway.
How tall is this tree in real life?
In real life, this tree is, I think it's about 5 feet.
It's a Carmen-sized tree?
It's a Carmen-sized bonsai tree. If you stood next to it, you'd have to use a stool to work on it.
Oof.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is because how I would feel about seeing this in person at a show is different from looking at this photo of it, because I keep using the word express throughout this whole all of this conversation we're having, but I think that it expresses as a massive tree. It feels like a redwood. It feels majestic.
Yeah. Okay.
In all of its own way, even though there are parts of it that are very, sparse.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is, we talk about this every once in a while in the show. Is what does a tree look like when it's far away, and what does a tree look like when it's really close up? And so this would be example, and this style of bald cypress is considered to be a far away view, so that's why you kind of feel that way. But it's
cool, great.
It's interesting to hear how you said it feels big, even though bonsai is all about scaling.
Sure.
So I think that's an interesting comment to me. But continue on.
I don't know. I really need to go to a show sometime and experience trees.
Oh, don't worry, we can get you in one. What are you doing in May?
Too soon to tell.
Yeah, I know it's a little too soon to tell, but there is a show out there that you could attend that's not too far from me in St. Louis, so we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just because that's the thing is obviously, and it probably has a lot to say about the way that I kept coming back to that stylized photograph of AC's tree where I was because I don't have experience of standing with one. But if this tree is 5 feet tall, I probably in person, in this photo, it feels to me like it's 100 feet tall. But even probably standing in front of it at 5 feet tall, I would still feel not overwhelmed by it, but it definitely has like a presence, you know?
Yeah.
Like a, not large, you know, I mean, try not to use like stupid descriptive words like large or things like that, but like it has sort of an imposing presence just in the way that it, you know, presents.
And for one of the things too is like, whenever I was in art school briefly in college, I remember whenever we looked at other people's work, and I remember one of the teachers that we would do critiques, and that was always like everyone's biggest fear was like, oh, we got to do critiques. Not going to sit here and say things about people's work and then put my own work up there. One of the things that the teacher or the professor would say is like, if you want to describe how it makes you feel, it's okay to say that it feels big, or it feels, you know, there's expression in this or that, or I like the color of this. But he's like, never say just like, I like it. He's like, give a little bit of detail about it, you know? And that's kind of one of the things that's going to be a future idea for the episode where we talk about approaching bonsai material and critiquing trees. We obviously need to do that after this conversation. But yeah, it's that is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the thing that I like very much get out of it. I sort of like, I'm interested to hear what you have to say. What do you have to say for yourself about the other piece? The other piece, because it doesn't, I mean, it only really presents scale to me.
Yeah. So the other piece, it's Kusamono. That's a Sarracenia alata. So that's a native carnivorous plant that grows in Louisiana. That plant was actually sourced not too far from where the tree was. And so when we display bonsai, I was saying earlier about natives, and natives are like, they pull on my heartstrings whenever people use natives, because that's what I love to do is, you know, show the area where the tree comes from, maybe show something that represents the environment, what time of year it is. And there's no better way to do that with, you know, with like a native displayed with a Kusamono native, because those directly show you what's going on in that time of year. And so my only letdown with this is that this was a test for this tree because it was a local show. So I felt a little bit more open to just putting the trees out there and seeing general reactions on how it displayed. But the display stand and the tree itself is not exactly how I want it to be displayed. But you know, but yeah, the accent or the Kusamono is there to give scale and also environment. So that's the correct way to look at it.
Yeah.
So Carmen, be as mean as possible. Carmen, let's see what you got.
Well, there's one branch at the top, so that I don't know what to do with. And I don't know if it's a matter of that I want that low branch to be heavier because the top feels heavier than the lower branch. And so I want more balance between the amount of foliage I'm seeing up top and down below. And so the second branch that's kind of going up and to the right, so like there's the apex and then like two branches kind of parallel to each other. The one in the middle there, I don't know if it needs to be shortened or if it needs to have an angle change. There's something that's a little bit off about the amount of balance, I think. And it might just be the amount of foliage that's at the bottom or that's not at the bottom of the tree. I want that bottom branch thicker, I think. And then, but I like how round the crown is. I think that's very nice. It shows a lot of age. And then the other critique that I have is I would probably go with a much smaller Kusamono with this one because the tree is so big and you want to make that even bigger. Like you want to even like make the scale of the tree even more impressive. So pick a shorter carnivorous plant to go with it. I think would have a stronger impact there. And maybe a lighter colored, I'm trying to think, what color is that Jita? Is it black?
Yeah, it's black, but I'm totally up for suggestions on what to use, because my take is that when I have a stone slab, I was going to use like boards, like long ways. You've seen this a couple of times when you have a big tree at like you've seen this at Nationals too. They have a massive tree, and the only thing they're like, oh, let's just get some really nice
put some
polished
slabs
wood
on it.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. But if there's another thing, I do have time for what I'm trying to set this tree up for to do some stand options. I would love to do a giant, like, formal stand, but it would be one hell of a job because the stand itself is like right over 5 feet long. I mean,
I feel like it's fine on the stone slab just on the table. Like, that almost serves as a Jita for it. So I like, that doesn't really bother me. A stand would be cool. Maybe a different colored Jita under the Kusamono, something a little bit brighter, maybe. And it might just be because it's on red and it's in a picture that I can't tell the color differences. Because, I mean, you don't want it to be gray, but the black makes it kind of disappear a little bit more. So maybe something a little bit, I don't know, lighter in color, maybe a wood to bring out the color of the bark. Because really the bark is the only thing that's brown here. So maybe something closer to that color. But I think it's almost there.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about the balance. It's getting me. And it might also be that it's in a picture. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. The impact of the branch structure on this tree, when you see it in person, you could see how the branches are like radial around. But when you take a flat picture of such a tall tree, then it takes the lines of the branches and really shows you. And after I photographed this tree, I could see that branch that's underneath the crown that's just straight and pokes out awkwardly. Probably could use some compression to get it closer. And so with flat top cypress style, usually the whole thing is that I've had a lot of people tell me is like, well, if this is a flat top cypress, wouldn't you just go straight for the Von Banting formula and remove all the branches below the crown?
No, because that's not how you. Sorry, go ahead.
No. That's I need to hear some kickback on that. Is because whenever I've gone into flat top cypresses here, it's such a Louisiana thing because I've seen other people attempt flat tops in different parts of the countries and other parts of the world. And I don't disagree with those takes, but when you see them in Louisiana, there's a certain way that they look. And that's what I'm going for, a very naturalistic approach on it. But at the same time, I'm trying to also honor the Von Banting model. And the Von Banting model does say that you would go up that tree and there might be one branch down there that's twisted. Like, I think most traditional flat top stylings would be, see that branch on the right side that comes up, it has that really sharp kind of, it just kind of comes in a little bit, then goes out suddenly. Yep. They would leave, I've seen this in all other flat top stylings, that they would take everything off but that one branch and then leave the crown like it is. Yeah. And that's that's a traditional model for that tree.
I think I like that you're being a little bit more naturalistic and you're leaving more on there because I feel that it is more natural and there's space for that. I don't think that doing flat top just one way is necessarily the way it has to be done. I appreciate you leaving more foliage because I feel like you see a lot of these trees in the swamps. And I mean, not just bald cypress, but like up north where you see some of the white cedars or the larches, they have that kind of scraggly growth going up the tree before they get to whatever's, left up top. And I think it's cool to show as a bonsai because a lot of times trees are so clean cut and, perfect that you sometimes lose that sense of actually being there. But this one feels very much like you could see it in the wild. And I love that.
Yeah. And there's a few things that, now that I'm looking at this image for a long time and we're kind of analyzing it, I think I'll be removing that branch to some extent because, I mean, I've still got some time, like I said before, I'm going to do what I'm thinking about doing with this tree as far as other shows. So yeah, I don't know. This is where it comes to, like, not only am I critiquing, but I'm also, pardon me. I'm also, just making considerations to the future because this is not going to stay the same. God dang, yeah.
It's going to grow and mature and you're going to have to make different cuts and
we're about to approach the fall here and the leaves are going to fall off of this tree and I'm going to go in and do a full wire on it. Cool. So it'll be different, but that's the point. And there you go. For our listeners who think that I can't sit here and, take my own medicine when it comes to critiquing, we're gonna do one of Carmen's in the near future, but I think we're ran a little long on this episode, so that will be for a future episode.
Hooray!
Yep. So no pressure, but it's coming. It's like whenever you have
So
to give
scared.
you give a speech like back in college whenever you're like in communications and you have like
Yeah,
the
and
whole
you're
thing.
like, you're next, but then the bell rings.
Exactly. It's that feeling like.
Uh-huh.
But
Well, I guess we'll do yours on Friday. Haha.
you're like, oh, awesome, and then you go through the whole weekend. You're like, I'm having a great time, and then you get back to the same feeling.
And you're like, I was prepared on Friday.
Nostalgia fear. The fear of being young and being scared of things for no reason. They actually have a whole horror
That's
genre.
supposed to go away because
There's a whole genre of like scary movies and stuff that's based around. One called Skinamarink, which I think is kind of funny since we're still kind of like in the Halloween season.
that sounds horrifying. That
Yeah.
song is weird, so I can imagine a horror movie just being the worst.
I hate everything
Yes.
about this.
Oh, I just
Yes.
got the shivers.
Skinamarink is you should go look it up. Go watch the preview for it. You
No,
would love
thank
it.
you.
It's this movie. It's like a found footage style movie where it's like
Ugh.
the perspective of like being a kid and the house is like super dark and there's just eerie like shadows in a hallway, and you just look at that for a while, and then the TV's flickering with like the static, and it's
No, and
Unless-
then the Skinamarink-a-dink-a-ding song starts playing, and it's like,
On an old rickety music box.
Yeah.
oh,
They could. But yeah, for listeners out there that are fans of scary movies, go check it out. It's it's an immersive scary movie.
I heard
But
the
anyway,
scariest listener tale today. I'll tell you later. I
Oh,
won't-
yeah, we
real-
can get it into the next one. But yeah, that's a good solid one for us. Thanks for hanging out, Matt. Hopefully we can get you on some more ones.
Yeah, my pleasure.
More
Yeah.
ones. More ones, please.
Get Matt for more ones, please.
A couple of extra more ones.
More one.
But yeah, it's always fun hanging out, talking bonsai, and getting some more perspectives and critiques in there. And we'll have to do an episode in the very near future where we explain how critiques work instead of everybody just seeing this random roadmap of us just saying things like this. But anyway, I will catch you guys on the next one then.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right, y'all have a great day.